是由美国加州奥克兰市英记世家赞助播出。地址：387号第9街奥克兰市。订餐电话510-465-1888。
各位观众大家好，这里是海外华人直播。2018年7月16号，我们参加美国在线新闻在讨论的一些这个新闻事件。
Yeah, the CIA produces leadership analysis. We've got analysts
是讲的是英国情报局，美国情报局的。
So they can explain to President Trump, here's what makes him tick.
讲评论川普到俄罗斯访问的一些事。
A guy who wants to show everyone that he's the man in charge, he's in control. It's kind of his attitude, It probably works with his own people a lot less effectively than it's going to work with us.
I got a quick story. I remember covering President Bush, George W. Bush, and one of his aides told me after a meeting with Putin that they were struck by one thing among others, which is that President Bush had, I think it was at Camp David or somewhere, and he had Barney, one of his small dogs, and he showed him off to Putin, and Putin did one of these, like he's a little small dog, and then pointed to his staff like, get my dog. And next thing you know, as this Bush staffer put it, he was basically yelling, this wasn't the name of the dog, Thor, get over here. And this dog that's like 9 times the size of Bush's dog shows up. Every little edge that Putin thinks he can, I'm not saying he succeeded, but my dog's bigger than yours. He tries.
Gentlemen, really great to talk to you again. Okay, we'll talk to you next hour, Daniel.
讲了一件有趣的事，就布什总统访问访克里姆林宫的时候，拿出他的小狗，结果没想到川普拿出比他布什大9倍的狗。双边对话。哇，这2个真正的高峰对话，川普和普京。
You need to know about the New Day 100 Home Loan for Veterans. It lets you borrow up to 100% of your home's value, not just 80%. And that can mean a lot more money for you and your family. With our military service, veterans like us have earned a valuable VA benefit, the right to apply for a VA home loan. The New Day 100 VA loan lets you refinance your mortgages, consolidate your credit card debt, put cash in the bank, and lower your payments an average of $600 a month. So call New Day USA. They look at your whole financial picture, not just your credit score. And they'll do everything they possibly can to get you approved. Call them today and get the financial peace of mind every veteran deserves.
Refinance and get the money you need from New Day USA. Call now. 1-855-719-8161.
Hi, I'm Annette, and I'm an actress. Under eye bags and wrinkles are so frustrating. I came across Plexiderm, and I was so excited. We have a model. His name is Richie, and all he's doing is taking a small amount. It's so powerful. That's all it takes. It literally creates an invisible layer that tightens the skin and smooths it out. All you do is gently rub it underneath your eyes, on your fine lines and wrinkles, and it visibly disappears in as little as 10 minutes.
Hi guys, my name is Sandy Marinesi. I'm a professional hair and makeup artist, and one of the #1 question that I always get is, can you make me look younger? We had a few people that we applied it to, and some of them, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna work. And I was so impressed how well it really worked. Now I could really say to people, yes, I can make you look younger.
The videos that you see are real. Those are the results you can expect to see. Get Plexiderm for up to 50% off, plus get free shipping. Order yours at plexiderm.com or call the number on your screen.
You know that's poison ivy, right?
Yeah, no.
Game's about to start, guys. Let's go.
There are some things you should understand before it's too late. Your car insurance coverage is one of them. Call Amica for a quote and we'll work harder to explain your options. For example, what's the difference between single limit and split limit coverage? Discover the car insurance you really need before you really need it. Call Amica now or get a quote at amica.com. Welcome to Amica. This is helpfulness insured.
President Trump on Hannity. In his first interview after meeting with Putin, he breaks down the critical discussion with Sean. The must-see sit-down. Tonight, only on Hannity.
I was surprised being able to pick up a language so quickly.
Babbel, the quick way to get conversational in a new language. Babbel's award-winning interactive technology gets you speaking right away.
You jump right in and learn relevant words and phrases right from the first lesson.
I couldn't believe how fast it was going. It was wonderful.
In a very short period of time, within 3 weeks, you're speaking Spanish.
So, which language do you want to speak today? Now, you can try Babbel free, the #1 selling language learning app in the world.
I worked in France, and now that I'm speaking French, my colleagues there are impressed.
I don't know who designed it, but it's genius. Now, if we go to a French restaurant, I can converse with the waiter in French, and I'm like, woohoo!
Try Babbel free today. Go to Babbel.com or download the app and see why Babbel is the quick way to get conversational in a new language. Babbel. Which language do you want to speak today?
We are awaiting this joint news conference between Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump in Helsinki, Finland. It's just past the 5 p.m. hour there. There is an ongoing lunch happening right now. We are waiting for the two world leaders to emerge from that and answer questions from reporters. A big moment that we await. Let's bring in Mary Kissel, editorial board member of the Wall Street Journal and a Fox News contributor. Mary, as we look on at these live pictures here, the briefing room starting at least to fill up, things running a bit behind schedule this morning. High anticipation for what these two will say, as the president has already indicated, as he said, and the only thing we've heard from him since this meeting began this morning, things are off to a good start.
Well, the president has also said, Sandra, and also it's great to be with you, the president has also said that it would be great if we had a good relationship, that the world wants these two countries to have a better relationship. But the thing to keep in mind here is that the reason we don't have a good relationship is because of Russian aggression in Syria, Russian occupations of Georgia and Moldova, Crimea, eastern Ukraine, the use of a nerve agent in Britain, the downing of MH17, a Malaysian airliner in which almost 300 civilians died. The Netherlands and Australia have pinned that on Russia. So Putin's MO here is to come into this summit and to say, let me help you solve all of the problems that I have created in the world. So it'll be very interesting to hear what was discussed, what the terms were, and if anything more was achieved other than just a handshake and perhaps a tough conversation behind closed doors.
Well, the president made a prediction, Mary, just a few minutes before he walked into that closed-door meeting with Putin this morning and said, we will end up having an extraordinary relationship. We'll see where that goes. Meantime, politics here at home, Democrats and Republicans divided on this issue. First and foremost, whether or not this meeting should have even happened. Some were calling on the president to cancel this summit after the Department of Justice announced the indictments of a dozen Russian intelligence operatives for allegedly hacking into the Democratic targets for the 2016 election. What are the politics here at home as this meeting continues?
Well, the DOJ announcement, Sandra, was not a surprise. We knew that Russia had hacked the DNC, so I kind of took that as really non-news. The bigger news in our mind at the Wall Street Journal editorial page is the fact that Vladimir Putin has already broken a 2017 agreement that he made with President Trump and King Abdullah of Jordan to de-escalate the conflict in southwestern Syria. As it turns out, that was really just a play for time. It was a way to keep the United States at bay and let Assad continue his campaign to subjugate his own people in a very brutal way in the suburbs of Damascus. Now that that campaign is over, Russia is helping Assad, along with the Iranians, now turn their attention to that area in southwestern Syria, where the Russians had supposedly, again, forged an agreement with President Trump. That is a deep humiliation. It's an embarrassment for the United States. And, you know, to our mind, again, at the editorial page, that is a much bigger deal than the DOJ indictment that we already knew about, really.
Interesting stuff. And Mary, as you saw on the cover of the New York Times this morning, some have decided how this meeting is going to go before it even happened. The New York Times writing, seat at table gives Putin upper hand. When President Vladimir Putin sits down with President Trump, he will already have accomplished virtually everything he could reasonably have hoped for. But there certainly is some big concern on the part of Vladimir Putin. He might want to talk about those sanctions. 700 Russian people and companies are under U.S. sanctions right now. You think that's coming up in this conversation?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between President Trump's rhetoric and his actions, because the rhetoric this morning, for instance, was very conciliatory. Let's be friends, kumbaya, wouldn't it all be great if we got along and got rid of nuclear weapons? The reality is that the Trump administration has been far tougher on Russia, particularly in the sanctions arena, than any prior administration. In particular, we've started to sanction Putin's inner circle. This matters a lot because essentially Putin presides over a criminal gang, and his power rests on two things: keeping the security services on his side and keeping the oligarchs of Russia on his side. And the way that he does that is to enrich them. So when we start sanctioning that inner circle, we're really starting to put pressure on Putin himself. That's why Putin is so eager to see those sanctions eased.
Mary, speaking on Fox News Sunday, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, said that the president was highly unlikely to recognize Putin's 2014 annexation of Crimea, but he didn't altogether rule it out as a possibility in this meeting. What do you expect on that front?
Well, we'll see, Sandra. I don't think it's good to predict what President Trump is going to do because we honestly almost never know. I do think it's a little bit worrying that he has blamed President Obama, which, look, rightly so. It was under Obama's watch that Putin went into Ukraine. But when you start to use that language, it sounds like somehow Crimea could be a bargaining chip. U.S. Congress in a bilateral fashion has come out against that. I know that Secretary Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton would likely advise against that. We'll see what he says, but the implications for U.S. deterrence would be huge if we in any way de facto or formally recognize the occupation of Ukraine, because the United States' legitimacy, our deterrence, rests on the idea that we protect small states. We protect Israel. We protect Taiwan. We protect Ukraine. We protect the defenseless. So the minute that we start allowing other nations and rogue nations to change borders, who could trust us again that we would have their backs? So that's why people are so focused on the discussion about Crimea.
Great to have you on the program this morning. Mary Kissel from the Wall Street Journal. Thank you. Well, it is 5:22 p.m. in Helsinki. Yeah. Bill Hemmer is standing by in Finland this morning, and we are looking at that briefing room, Bill. It looks to be filling up a bit here as everything's a bit delayed, but it looks like we should soon see those two world leaders answering questions before reporters.
Very interesting conversation with Mary. She makes a lot of very interesting points about the level of aggression that has taken us to this point over the past 4 years. And Sandra, as you described that, Blake Berman from Fox Business says the lunch right now, the bilateral meeting there, is moving along quickly. If that is the case, perhaps this press conference begins sooner than we thought. Now, we were given guidance last night that on the schedule would hit at 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, we have clearly blown through that, in part because Vladimir Putin got here late by 30 minutes. So all this started to move at a much slower pace. The one-on-one meeting seemed to last about 2 hours. The bilateral meeting that includes the aides on both sides is still going on. So that's John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, and General Kelly. But prior to leaving Moscow, I want to bring this to you now. This is the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin. He talked about today's meeting being a baby step. Then he talked about the special responsibilities for global security that both these countries share, quite revealing there. And then he said that Vladimir Putin respects President Trump's America First attitude because Vladimir Putin has a Russia First attitude. So that was the commentary before leaving Moscow here for Helsinki. About an hour ago, we saw the president. He was asked, how does it feel in between those meetings? He said, I think it's a good start, a very good start for everybody. But what did they talk about? What was the demeanor? Was there ground gain on behalf of either side? The shot is up screen left. Inside that room are President Trump and Vladimir Putin. They'll take questions together, expected to start any moment now, and you will not miss a minute here in America's newsroom. Trump and Putin holding expanded bilateral talks right now. When they break, we'll see both leaders inside that room as our live coverage continues from Helsinki on this very special and historic Monday morning.
No matter who rides point, there are over 10,000 Allstate agents riding sweep. And just like Tyrone Taylor, they know what it takes to help keep you protected. Are you in good hands?
The sun used to make our outdoor deck and patio space so hot and uncomfortable, we couldn't use it.
But then we discovered the Sunsetter retractable awning. Our Sunsetter retractable awning opens and closes in just 60 seconds. It keeps our patio about 20 degrees cooler.
It provides instant shade and instant protection from the sun's harmful rays.
And our Sunsetter costs under $700.
But now you can get your Sunsetter for as little as $599 when you call now to get this special $200 discount certificate.
We love our Sunsetter retractable awning, and you're going to love yours too.
Call now for this free awning idea kit packed with great awning solutions. Plus, get this $200 discount certificate that will bring you your Sunsetter for as little as $599.
But this is a limited time offer. Call now.
Sunsetter retractable awnings are assembled in America and are guaranteed to last for years.
And talk about extras, you can choose from motorized awnings for push-button opening and closing.
Hundreds of thousands of families own and love their Sunsetter retractable awnings. We're one of them, and you should be too.
Stay cooler.
And do it all at $200 off if you call now.
Call now for your free awning idea kit with local dealer info and $200 discount certificate. Life is better under a Sunsetter. Call now and save.
Call 1-800-401-3008. 1-800-401-3008.
Have you been told you need neck or back surgery? If so, you do have a choice. Call Laser Spine Institute and say yes to a pain-free life with our minimally invasive spine surgery. It's safer than open back surgery, letting you get back to living life on your terms.
I can lift my son high over my head again.
If you have spinal stenosis, bulging or herniated disc, sciatica, or other chronic spine conditions,
call 1-800-736-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Thanks to a less than 1-inch incision, you'll be up and walking within hours of surgery, so you can get back to your life in days instead of months.
I feel like Laser Spine Institute was an answer to prayer.
Join the thousands of people every year who say goodbye to chronic neck and back pain with Laser Spine Institute. Make today the day you say yes to living a pain-free life.
Call 1-800-736-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Baby boomers, here's something you should know. There's a serious virus out there that 1 in 30 boomers has, yet most don't even know it. A virus that's been almost forgotten. It's hepatitis C. Hep C can hide in the body for years without symptoms. Left untreated, it can lead to liver damage, even liver cancer. The only way to know if you have Hep C is to ask your healthcare provider for the simple blood test. If you have Hep C, it can be cured. For us, it's time to get tested. It's the only way to know for sure.
At Airborne Wireless Network, our team's answering the question, what is the future of the internet? A connection faster than the morning train? High-speed bandwidth in rural America? Video conferencing from 30,000 feet? Our technology is leading the way to make that and much more reality. We've got a practical solution for solving the world's connectivity challenges so the future could mean internet for all. Airborne Wireless Network, redefining global connectivity.
It is 5:30 late afternoon here in Helsinki. I'm Bill Hemmers. Our coverage continues live on this historic day, the meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin. We're told the lunch now is wrapping up. The bilateral meeting may conclude any moment now, and once that Once that is over, we'll see these two men before reporters there in the briefing room that is starting to trickle in right now and fill up at the moment. You think about so many things that these two men bring to the table. Talk about the relationship. They've met two other times, of course, before, but this seems to have so much more level of import when you consider the issues around the world. Their third meeting today. They've spoken on the phone many times, maybe 8 or 10 since President Trump came to office in January of 2017. There are levels of cooperation, certainly, maybe on nuclear weapons. We could see that today. Perhaps on getting Iran out of Syria. There may be some movement on that today. But there are clear disagreements on Crimea, on Ukraine, and certainly the evidence that Bob Mueller has brought forth on behalf of Russian intel meddling with the election of 2016, rather. There's a press conference that will begin in a moment now. Before that starts, I want to bring in our Chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, traveling here in Helsinki. And John, I think you're in the room. Where do you think? I see you now. Where do you think we are right now, John?
We don't know, Bill. We could be just a few minutes away. Last estimate I heard might have been somewhere nearer to 6 o'clock, but it appears that this expanded bilateral meeting is moving along more quickly than we initially thought, so it could be sooner. We'll just stay tuned. You mentioned people trickling in. I've got to tell you, Bill, it was an absolute torrent because you've got the Russian media here, you've got the American press, you've got the international press, a very small room to get a lot of people into, and this process so far has taken about 90 minutes to get us all into this room. But thankfully, we're getting settled and we're getting very close. Interesting to point out that one-on-one bilateral meeting between President Trump and President Putin went on for more than 2 hours, reminiscent of what happened at the G20 in Hamburg, Germany last year, where we expected the two leaders would meet for maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. They spent 2 hours together. So clearly they have a lot to talk about, which makes all the more ironic the fact that these two met on the sidelines of the APEC conference in Da Nang, Vietnam last year, but didn't have a bilateral meeting. The official reason for the White House, they didn't have much to talk about. But look at how much is on the table. We've got Crimea, we've got Syria, we've got meddling in the election, we've got the nerve gas attack in London. So what to do about Syria? Why is Vladimir Putin continuing to prop up Bashar al-Assad? What happened to that deconfliction agreement that we had with them in Syria? I mean, there is so much to talk about. In addition, the president wants to talk about nuclear proliferation, military issues, and trade. The president said going into this that the relationship with Russia was at a low point. I've seen other analyses that believe that their level of cooperation, the type of relationship the U.S. has with Russia, is at a low point from the end of the Cold War. The president going into this with low expectations, saying he doesn't know what to expect out of this, but coming out of that one-on-one bilateral meeting, the president said a very good start, a very, very good start for everyone. So, Bill, he usually doesn't say that unless he has made, I don't want to say some sort of breakthrough, but at least some sort of movement. Very quickly, when very soon from now, when the leaders come out, we'll be able to ask them the questions about the things that they didn't want to talk about going in, and we'll see what they have to say, Bill.
Yeah, I believe it's 2 aside. I think on Friday it was 4 aside with Theresa May there in England. John, have you got any word about any paperwork they would sign? I mean, normally you get a communique on a summit like this, but we don't expect a communique. But will they sign anything on behalf of the two leaders today?
You know, Bill, I really don't know. You know, typically when you go into these meetings or summit as this was called, and then John Huntsman, the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, came out, or to Russia came out and said, don't call it a summit, it's a meeting. But typically when you have meetings like this, you've got what are called deliverables, and they may be small, but, you know, even being small, they can be significant, you know, given the circumstances. But we don't know if there are any deliverables coming out of this, or if there is any statement that is going to be signed. We knew early on in the North Korea summit that there was going to be a declaration because the White House made us aware of that. We haven't heard anything from the White House about what these two leaders may say. So when they come out, hopefully not long from now, it's going to all be a surprise to all of us, Bill. It will actually be news.
John, yeah, we are coming to the two most important and perhaps most intriguing aspects of this entire meeting. The press conference, as you just point out, and then we'll see Chris Wallace's sit-down for 30 minutes with Vladimir Putin, and we'll share that with viewers back at home and around the world. We will parse the language, John, and we'll try and read the body language as well. But this is about the point when we find out if Helsinki was worth it.
Exactly. And again, the president lowering expectations going into this as he did, going into the North Korea summit a month ago in Singapore, so that any little bit of movement looks like it's a success. Don't forget, we'll hear from President Trump at length as well, because he's doing interviews with both Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity that are going to air later on today on Fox. But I think what is most intriguing about all of this, Bill, and it might be a 2-on-2, maybe a little more. We haven't had any official word yet from the White House, though typically these things are 2-and-2. But it will give us a chance as journalists to ask the uncomfortable questions that these two leaders didn't want to talk about going into this, such as, what did the president say to Vladimir Putin about meddling in the election? He promised going into this that he was going to tell him to cut it out and make sure he didn't do it for the November 2018 elections. What did Vladimir Putin say to the president? Because he has on several occasions, at one time in denying Vietnam, said it to the president's face that the Russian government had nothing to do with this. And a couple of weeks ago, the president tweeted out that Russia is again saying it had nothing to do with it. So we'll be able to push them on that. We'll be able to push them on Crimea. If we get enough time in terms of questions, we can ask Vladimir Putin about that Salisbury attack. And we saw another person die as a result of that when they picked up a perfume bottle that they thought had some perfume in it. It actually had a very powerful neurotoxin in it. So we'll get to ask all of these questions that neither one of these leaders wanted to talk about going into this, Bill, which is really, from a journalistic perspective, makes this such an important and historic moment.
Excellent points. Thank you, John. We'll be back with you in a moment inside that room, okay, just across town here in Helsinki.
Thanks,
prior to, you bet. Thank you, John. One-on-one talks there, Sandra. The world wants to see us get along. That was the message from President Trump. As we wait in Helsinki, back to you now in New York.
All right, we'll see how things go with that lunch. Looks like it is moving along a little bit more quickly than we thought. We're going to have a lot to talk about here and now and after this news conference. Let's get back to our panel. Chris Stirewalt, Fox News politics editor. Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Clinton and Fox News contributor. Lisa Booth, senior fellow at Independent Women's Voice, also a Fox News contributor. Lisa, to you first, as we look at this briefing room filling up here. Things off to a good start. We heard from the president so far. What are you expecting when those two world leaders step up to the microphones and answer questions after it looks like the lunch is moving along a little bit faster than expected, but the one-on-one was about 2 hours longer than expected?
Well, and having worked in political communications, I am very interested and looking forward to watching this joint press conference. I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see how both sides frame the conversations that have taken place, to see the spin. Also, someone mentioned earlier, or Bill had mentioned earlier, looking at the body language as well between Putin and President Trump. And look, Russia has been almost a singular focus of the American media for about a year plus. I'm also interested in seeing what sort of questions are asked. So I've got my popcorn out somewhere, but I'll be watching it.
And of course, there's certainly going to be a question, Chris Stirewalt, on election meddling, don't you think? I mean, as John Roberts just said, that was the one thing both world leaders did not want to discuss heading into this, but the president did say, I'll ask him about it.
Well, this is a very tricky one, because if Trump accedes to the claims, Rod Rosenstein, this prosecution that's going forward, if he takes these seriously and confronts Putin in a serious way about this, he is then hurting himself politically at home. Both of these men, as they stand there, are thinking about their domestic audiences at home. They're not thinking about each other. They're not thinking about what's going on in the room. They're thinking how this is going to be portrayed at home. And if Trump is seen as being tough on Putin about the election meddling and what the Russians did to us, he is then casting a shadow over his 2016 win. So that's why Trump is always loath to do it. He doesn't want to do it because it doesn't invalidate his win, but it casts a shadow over it. On the other hand, if he doesn't do it, if the president doesn't take a hard line on this, then he is playing into the hands of his critics who say that he is soft on Russia because he's compromised. It's a tough spot.
Doug, your thoughts as we look on and await President Trump and Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, I want to see if President Trump reaffirms our commitment to NATO and our traditional allies, or do we get a sense today that perhaps he will be continuing his process of changing the dialogue and indeed underlying relations, having referred to the EU as foes, having criticized NATO? Will he speak of President Putin as more than a, quote, competitor, as he did before the summit? And what practical developments, if any, will we get? These are huge questions. I don't think we have any answers as we sit here today, but I'm pretty confident after the press conference and the interviews, Sandra, that we'll have on our network, we'll know the score.
We'll have a lot to talk about, that's for sure. Lisa, the president has indicated that this meeting in and of itself is an accomplishment. He believes in meetings. He's been very firm on that. Is this a big accomplishment for this presidency?
I don't know. I mean, obviously President Trump has, as I mentioned earlier on the show, and we all know that President Trump has really set expectations extremely low for this meeting, essentially saying that the only point of this meeting is to try to thaw that relationship. So I don't necessarily know if I would say the meeting in itself is a success. And I would also be, cautious, because I think Bill had mentioned earlier, obviously the hope with Syria is to try to get Iran out of there. But then the question is, what do we concede to make that happen? So obviously dealing with Russia, they're not a reliable actor. They're not to be trusted. And so, no, I can't necessarily say that the meeting in itself is a success.
As far as what the president says coming out of this, right? I mean, Chris, we're looking on at the news conference that is about to take place. We don't know how many questions each world leader is going to take, but we do know that before this lunch, where they have their national security aides at their side, before that lunch, there was a 2-hour one-on-one between these two. What will we really learn about what was discussed in that room?
So the sequence is important here. So you start out with the two leaders together, and then they bring their teams together and basically start saying out loud the things that they talked about or agreed to in their long discussion. And that's the time when your advisor says, well, I think what you really meant, Mr. President. Now, you probably don't do that with Putin because they'll shoot you out of a cannon. But for Trump, it's like, yes, and you can see Pompeo saying, yes, Mr. President, but also remembering that the Crimea, da-da-da-da-da. So they clean it up there, and they're basically agreeing as they sit across the table from each other at that luncheon. They are agreeing to the terms about what they're going to say when they go in front of the press and what is real and what's not. So that's what's happening now is they're running a curry comb over what happened for those 2 hours, and then they're going to come out and put the show pony in.
And as the president said, I really think the world wants to see us get along. We are getting some indication that things are moving along in that meeting with their aides by their sides. A White House official is telling Fox News could be the top of the hour when that news conference begins. We'll take that live when that happens. Bill?
As we await for more on that, Sandra, this is going to be a very fascinating dynamic. You're going to have reporters called in here in a matter of moments as you see the room filling up here. And then President Putin will go first, followed by President Trump. In all likelihood, they'll take two questions aside, and each leader will have a chance to answer each question. But who they call on and the topics that reporter chooses will be a point of deep interest here. We're going to bring back our guys in a moment here, but the press pool has been called in the briefing room, which means we should get underway very close now. Some of the indications we're getting from our Fox crew inside the room say maybe top of the hour, so that would be about 15, 18 minutes from now. So don't go anywhere. Our live coverage of the Trump-Putin summit here in Helsinki continues right after this.
Theft really is this frequent. An identity is stolen every 2 seconds. See if your social security number has been compromised with a free dark web triple scan at Experian.com/scan.
From the very beginning, it was always our singular focus, a distinct determination to do whatever it takes, use every possible resource to fight cancer, and never lose sight of the patients we're fighting for. Our cancer treatment specialists share the same vision. Experts from all over the world working closely together to deliver truly personalized cancer care. Specialists focused on treating cancer using advanced technologies and more precise treatments than before. Working as hard as we can, doing all that we can for everyone who walks through our doors. This is Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And these are the specialists we're proud to call our own. Treating cancer isn't one thing we do. It's the only thing we do. Expert medicine works here. Learn more at cancercenter.com. Cancer treatment.
Hello, guy. That's right, and I'm here to help you get the best sleep of your lives.
Oh, you have a down pillow. Here's the problem with down pillows. You lay there, you feel comfortable, and guess what? It goes down, and you got one bent neck. So this pillow's no good, and I see you're sleeping on memory foam.
Right.
Well, I'll show you what's wrong with that idea.
Okay.
Sleep's all about too high or too low, and I'm going to show you where your comfort level would be.
You know, that feels better.
Right, that's better, but I'm not going to sit and hold this all day. So every morning you're getting up like, you know, it's not good. Just like all of you out there, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there, and none of them worked. That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck aligned. My Pillow will hold its shape all night long, regardless of your sleep position, for the best sleep of your life.
Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use this promo code and Mike will give you a second MyPillow absolutely free. Hurry, this offer ends August 1st.
It feels great to wake up in the morning and feel well rested. It's shocking to me that a pillow could make this big of a difference in my life.
I make all my pillows in my home state of Minnesota, and I back them with my 60-day money-back guarantee. My Pillow has a 10-year warranty, and it's machine washable and dryable. Sleep is one of the most important things to your health, and My Pillow is one of the most important things to your sleep.
Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use this promo code and Mike will give you a second MyPillow absolutely free. Hurry, this offer ends August 1st.
You're sleeping better.
Much better.
I knew you would.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
You haven't seen my wedding ring, have you?
No.
Mom,
I caught a snake, but it got out.
There are some things you should understand before it's too late.
You've got a what?
Your car insurance coverage is one of them. That's why you should call Amica. We explain what's important to you, like the difference between collision, liability, and comprehensive insurance. And we guide you to the right decision.
that's not that big.
Call Amica now for a free auto insurance quote. Welcome to Amica. This is helpfulness. Insured.
Attention timeshare owners. Are you having a hard time getting what you paid for and experiencing increasing maintenance fees? Lone Star Transfer is #1 to get you out of your timeshare. Call 833-594-0079 or online at lonestartransfer.com.
Coming up on 6 o'clock in the evening, live here in Helsinki, we're told that briefing will get underway in a matter of moments. The press conference between Vladimir Putin and President Trump. Remember, the American president said this is a get-to-know-each-other meeting. Well, will it be more than that? We are about to find out. I want to bring back in Ed Henry and Daniel Hoffman, former CIA station chief here in Helsinki, also in Moscow and a Fox News contributor. And gentlemen, I don't know what's placed on the podium there, but maybe that's a sign. We'll see in a moment in the area behind us. Play the role of a reporter, both of you. Ed, you did this for years. Dan, go ahead and wear the hat now. What would be your question to Vladimir Putin?
So I think I would ask Vladimir Putin about the traitor Edward Snowden, to whom Putin granted asylum. This is a guy who President Trump said should face justice in the United States. He said that during the campaign and said he would bring him home. I'd like to put Putin on the spot and pressure him a bit to explain why Snowden is still in Russia. He should be in the United States.
So Snowden was in Hong Kong and Putin allowed him to stay in Moscow.
Yeah, and certainly downloaded Snowden's brain so that he could target us better.
We're getting a 2-minute warning, but Eddie, you got to make it real quick.
I like that question because when everyone's zigging and asking about election meddling, you zag with something that's unexpected. And so likewise, I think I'd like to press Putin about why he continues to protect his client in Syria, Bashar al-Assad. You know, Assad is in power.
I'm going to pause you right there only because I want to welcome our Fox viewers as we pause a moment here for our viewers around the world to join us. I'm Bill Hemmer, live in Helsinki on this historic Monday. It is almost 6 o'clock in the evening, and this is Fox News continuing coverage of the meeting between Presidents Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in Finland as we await these two world leaders to come to the microphone and take questions from reporters who have gathered from the United States, from Russia, and from all over the world. 1,400 credentialed journalists have gathered to find out what these two leaders can come to terms on with each other in their early and young relationship. With me now, Dan Hoffman and Ed Henry, as our coverage continues live in Helsinki. And gentlemen, to both of you now, Ed, you were saying your question would be what?
Press Putin on the fact that why he continues to protect Bashar al-Assad, the dictator in Syria. Without that protection from Putin, the civil war wouldn't still be going on, thousands upon thousands dying. For President Trump, I think you need to press him, not just on meddling, but why he hasn't pinned it on Putin. When he's asked about meddling, he'll shift the topic, President Trump, to Peter Strzok and some of the real legitimate problems at the FBI, but will never put the blame on Putin. Likewise, as Mary from the Wall Street Journal a few moments ago was pointing out, when asked about Crimea, President Trump will always say, well, it was Obama's fault. And yes, he was weak. He allowed it to happen, perhaps. But he wasn't the one who grabbed it, Barack Obama. It was Putin who illegally decided to annex Crimea. Why do you let Putin off the hook?
Dan, you have studied Vladimir Putin your entire professional life as a member of the CIA, working in Helsinki and Moscow, and later in parts in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Vladimir Putin sees this opportunity how today with his meeting with President Trump?
And I think he sees this as an opportunity to frame the relationship between Russia and the United States. He wants to be perceived as equal in stature to President Trump. And that's why he's here. That's why he's meeting in Helsinki, Finland, which is right next door to Russia. He likes the optics of President Trump coming to him. His own media will portray this as the United States really needing Russia more than vice versa to solve the problems of the world.
We're 180 miles as the bird flies due west of St. Petersburg, normally Leningrad. It is impossible not to feel the shadows of the Cold War when you're here in this country. And when Vladimir Putin comes here, knowing all the professional spies you dealt with for a long time who came from Moscow to Finland, do you get that same sense today?
History matters to Finland, and I think it's a poignant reminder for all of us the way a small country resisted Soviet aggression during the Second World War when the Soviets attacked, and the Finns fought fiercely to maintain their independence. And viewers may remember Finnish soldiers on cross-country skis fighting the Red Army, and they maintained their independence after the war and a sense and neutrality, and have always been a bridge between East and West.
This relationship between Presidents Putin and Trump, it's quite dynamic. These are large personalities on a global stage who have come together for the third time personally to talk one-on-one, but no point bigger than now when you think about the Bob Mueller indictments that came down against 12 Russians on Friday. John Bolton was speaking on the talk shows over the weekend suggesting that that has strengthened the hand of President Trump to go at Vladimir Putin and to press him on the Russian meddling of the election of 2016. But I mentioned this relationship. They've spoken on the phone several times, 8 or 10 by last count, from the White House to Moscow and Red Square. With regard to what they could cooperate on today, you have to consider the nuclear equation here. An agreement that is set to lapse in 3 years' time, 2021, that could be agreed to freeze the amount of nuclear warheads and transport warheads that each country is allowed to have. The number runs from 1,700 up to 2,200. They could agree very easily between the two of them without permission from each legislative body back in their respective countries to go forward with that. Look for that possibility. Also, there's a possibility with movement on Iranian forces operating today in Syria. But the long list of disagreements have been talked about for weeks now. Ukraine, Crimea, the cyber war, the election meddling I mentioned a moment ago, the threat that Vladimir Putin feels from a strong NATO that President Trump left just last week in Brussels with... They left Brussels saying they're united as a force and a power around the world, and especially here in Europe today. We were supposed to get this press conference about an hour ago. The reason it's running late is because, A, Vladimir Putin showed up late here, and then the meeting with President Trump, the one-on-one, went an hour longer than was on the schedule. But that's okay. We'll find out in a moment just how much these men had to talk about and to share. Back with my guest here now. Ed, do you think there is a breakthrough in Helsinki?
It's hard to tell, obviously, but I'm very skeptical of the president in that CBS interview yesterday saying, I've got very low expectations. I don't expect something. This is a president who likes the dramatic moment, or frankly, I don't think we'd be in Helsinki. So I would be surprised if there's not some kind of an agreement, either on Syria, Iran, pick your subject. The other point I would make is nuclear weapons and disarmament, as you suggested.
But in order to do that, you have to do a lot of groundwork.
Sure.
Prior to coming together and meeting, perhaps the announcement is a suggestion that they'll continue to work toward
that's
that.
What they did in Singapore.
A final solution.
We didn't have a final deal with North Korea either in terms of denuclearization, but you had a piece of paper that said we're getting the ball rolling.
Okay. Dan?
No, I think that makes sense. We've got so many contentious issues here. I think you're right to start with arms control. Even during the worst of times for us, during the Cold War, when President Reagan, rightly so, called the Soviet Union an evil empire, President Reagan was meeting with general secretaries of the Soviet Union, including Gorbachev, and negotiating arms control deals. But that took years. And I think what we might see today, if we see some deliverables, is maybe the establishment of some working groups that could focus on Syria, North Korea, arms control, and other things that matter to both countries.
Do you imagine you walk out of here with just a handshake?
And
say that, you know, we're building on relationships, and, you know, relationships are important, but this was as they said in Moscow earlier today, a first step.
Yeah, that's always possible. I would just be surprised. Both of these leaders have a flair for the dramatic, particularly President Trump. He does want something substantive to come out of here. I'm not saying it's going to change the world forever, but he wants something to move the ball forward. And you mentioned this point earlier. If you think back to 1 week ago, how things move at the speed of light in the Trump administration. It was only 1 week ago he was at the White House reshaping the Supreme Court for the next 3 or 4 decades, if Brett Kavanaugh is confirmed. And so now here he is on the world stage, his second summit, one-on-one, in 4.5 weeks. It was just June 12th, 13th in Singapore with North Korea's leader, and now here we are, July 16th. 2 pretty dramatic one-on-one meetings in the span of 1 month.
And on that point, speaking with administration officials over the weekend, and lowering expectations in Scotland before the president came here. And Vladimir Putin did the same thing, too, by the way. They talked about this could be the first step in a multi-year path, which is reflecting on Singapore, and you were there. That was the message, too, with Chairman Kim.
Yes, and we have to be clear-eyed that Kim Jong-un has been backsliding. And President Trump, tweeted out that letter from Kim a few days ago saying, I'm still on the path, but there have been these satellite images suggesting otherwise. And I think there's similarities in the 2 summits as well. Can you trust Kim Jong-un with what he signs? Can you trust Vladimir Putin? As Dan has spelled out very, very well. He's a former KGB guy and someone who's poisoned people, as John Roberts was reporting, puts free journalists in jail. He's a bad guy, and it's hard to tell whether you can trust this man.
To this point, that's exactly right, Ed. How much of this, Dan, is about trust today?
I think both sides will trust a process where they can express their views openly with each other. What I think with Russia, and with Putin in particular, is we're in a mistrust but verify part of our relationship. And one of the interesting things, I will speak from my own background in the intelligence community, is that after this meeting, the intelligence community will be looking for reflections in Russia of how the Russians perceive this meeting. Vladimir Putin will talk about it. His associates will discuss it, and it will be on the intelligence community, the onus on our collectors, to inform the president about how Russia really will, in fact, react to whatever agreements were made.
There was a spokesperson for Vladimir Putin who was speaking in Moscow earlier today before Vladimir Putin flew here to Helsinki. He talked about a baby step. That was the quote he used, a baby step toward fixing what are considered bad relationships. And a lot of people think, well, the Cold War was pretty bad. The Cuban Missile Crisis was bad in the 1960s. The interest of mutual shared destruction, that was pretty serious when it came to nuclear weapons in the Cold War. But they reflect on a relationship that's gone sour over the past 4 years. And the moment it went sour was the incursion into eastern Ukraine and the seizing of the port at Crimea. And that was the moment that things went the other direction. Do you agree with that, Dan?
I think it was a combination of things. You know, over the past 20 years since Vladimir Putin seized power, he's embarked on a Russia resurgent strategy. In our backyard, countries like Venezuela and Cuba, in Syria, where he's propped up Assad's regime, guilty of crimes against humanity, meddling in our elections, influencing our cyberspace with our social networking and our media sites, poisoning Sergei Skripal in the United Kingdom. The list goes on and on and on. It's all of these things taken together, I think, that Vladimir Putin has driven the relationship to its depths, not the United States.
I think it's interesting when you talk about cybersecurity. When we flew into Helsinki, we were given warnings about what we were told to do and not do on our smartphones. Refrain from banking. That was a quite stunning thing to get a message like that. And the message was clear. You could be followed. Is it?
Yeah,
Is that the reality?
It is right now. This is a big deal, and this is kind of a lot of intelligence officers flooding the zone right now to collect information, and so that's what happens in a place like this on a day like this.
Not just the 2016 election, but America's got a midterm election coming in hot. It's just a few months away. And the president, forget the Democrats for a minute, who criticize him again and again, Russia, 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 about 2016. Put that aside for a second. 2018, the president's own intelligence team, Dan Coates, director of national intelligence, testified to Congress, blinking red light. We've got a problem. Russia is trying to attack us again. So the president can dismiss the Democratic critics, but when his own team is warning about the midterms right in front of us, we need to pay attention to that. I suspect that will come up.
You both referred to this Russia first policy. You know, the president looks at America first. That's what he ran on, and that's what he campaigned on. And Vladimir Putin sees it the same way, and that was another remark that we got from the Kremlin earlier today. Sandra, we were given a 2-minute warning about 10 minutes ago, and I don't know what's going on, and whatever happens, happens, but we're going to wait patiently for these two world leaders to emerge inside that room.
Hey, maybe they decided they had a few more things to talk about. What we do know, heading into these talks, the president said he was going to talk to Vladimir Putin about trade and China, Crimea, Syria. He hinted ahead of this trip that he would bring up election meddling. Not sure if he'd get anywhere with Vladimir Putin there. But it's important to manage expectations, and the president tried to do that by saying that he will end up, or we will end up as a country, having an extraordinary relationship with Russia. And he does believe, as he has said before, getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. He's saying that again, and he started out this day with Vladimir Putin congratulating him on hosting what he said was a really good World Cup. After they briefly shook hands and started the one-on-one meeting together this morning, sort of a light moment there before they engaged in those one-on-one conversations and then went into that working lunch where they had their closest aides beside them. That went a little bit faster than predicted, we were told, while that was going on. And then we were given that 2-minute warning, Bill, but as it happens sometimes, that hasn't begun yet. So we are looking live inside that briefing room inside the presidential palace, Helsinki, Finland, where the president has been meeting with Vladimir Putin. Here at home, Democrats and Republicans have been somewhat divided on this trip, what the president should talk about, what the biggest concern should be sitting down with Vladimir Putin. Some even saying they didn't want the U.S. president to sit down with the Russian president. So a big meeting indeed is happening. It has been happening behind closed doors there in the presidential palace. And Bill, as it happens sometimes, they are just not running on time, but we will certainly bring everybody that news conference when it begins.
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock in the evening here in Helsinki. It's a remarkable place to visit, and just, you know, the hospitality and the warmth of the Finnish people. But also this time of year, Sandra, it is light 20 hours out of 24 hours a day. The Northern Lights, or the land of the midnight sun, whatever phrase you use, but we're in that time period with these northern latitudes here in southern Finland, and you know, we saw the sun out, you know, reflecting on the skyline about 12:30 in the morning last night, and it comes back up at 4 a.m., and it's a remarkable thing to see. I've had the opportunity to see it in different parts of the world, here in Alaska and St. Petersburg, before it became St. Petersburg, Leningrad, and it's a stunning thing to think that you can have daylight just about all day long in the month of July. But back with my guests here now, Dan Hoffman and Ed Henry, and one of the other messages I mentioned from the Kremlin earlier today, and again, we're reading tea leaves here to try and figure out what Putin's message is, and we'll hear it from his mouth in a moment here. But they talked about a special responsibility for global security for both leaders and for both countries. Now, I understand what that means in America. That means protect democracy and make sure that it flourishes around the world. What does it mean in Moscow?
For Moscow, it means involve yourself in many regions all over the world, primarily in conflict with your main enemy, the United States, and do that so that you've got a seat at the bargaining table, so that you can resolve some of those issues with the United States. The Russians essentially create a lot of problems worldwide, and then they like to sit down at the negotiating table with you and try to solve them.
So they'll make a move, and if there's pushback, do they stop or do they continue?
They don't stop with moral suasion. I think sometimes you kind of have to rap them on the knuckles a little bit and remind them that we actually can wield a big stick when we need to.
Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is a president, President Trump, who has talked about being tough on the world stage, tougher than Barack Obama. He certainly has shown that in some ways. Syria, for example, the famous or infamous red line. Barack Obama, I was in the White House briefing room when he said, that'd be a red line for me if Bashar al-Assad, who, this is many years later now, 6 years later, this was in 2012, we're still dealing with Assad and the civil war and the violence and all of the trouble. Back in 6 years ago, Barack Obama promised if he uses chemical weapons, that'd be a red line. It would change my equation on U.S. military action. Red line was crossed. Women and children targeted. Dozens killed. And Barack Obama pulled back on U.S. military action. This president, President Trump, has now at least twice launched U.S. airstrikes against Syria, backed up the talk with action. And I guess I set it up by saying, will he do that as well with Putin? Not military action against Russia, but going behind closed doors and in public as well, and not shying away from pointing out some of the obvious things we've been talking about. And I hear from some of the president's fellow Republicans in Congress, for example, they get frustrated that he doesn't appear. I'm not talking about Chuck Schumer and the Democrats who are on his case about 2016, but the Bob Corkers and others who say, why are you not calling some of this stuff out, sir?
There was a reporter who shouted a question about an hour ago. How does it feel, Mr. President? He said, I think it's a good start, a very good start for everybody. So we'll hear in a moment here. We'll hear more in a moment. But here is the schedule as we get to John Roberts inside that briefing room. We thought this would begin on the schedule about an hour and 20 minutes ago. That's what we were told last night. Things have gone longer. John, inside the room right now. Well, what is your sense? What's happening there?
Well, what's happening right now is that there is a gentleman who came in with the American Press Corps from The Nation. I was talking to him earlier today, and he was showing me a couple of opinion pieces that were written in the Nation. And now he brought with him a sign that says nuclear weapons test ban treaty. And so now there's a little bit of a wrestling match going on as he is being ejected from the room by the Finnish authorities here. I mean, it's pretty clear that he came in here to make a statement. And when you're a member of the press, you can ask a pointed question, but you're not allowed to hold up a sign and make a statement. So a little bit of chaos here on the way out. He was initially taken out and talked to and then brought back. And as he was brought back, he was telling the people in the room here, including the White House press corps, that somebody had said that he had a sign that he was going to hold up during the press conference. And clearly, Bill, he did. But he's now out of the room. And hopefully, let me just jump up here because we got some obstacles in front of us. Hopefully this press conference is going to start soon. We got a 2-minute warning almost 20 minutes ago now, and it's not the first time that that's happened. I remember in the Rose Garden on the South Lawn of the White House, we got a 2-minute warning. 25 minutes later, the president came out. We still don't have anybody from either the U.S. or the Russian delegations proper out here. As soon as they come out, that's when we know that we'll be very close to starting here. Bill?
Thank you, John. To our viewers at home, just be patient with us. We've been watching this unfold for many hours now. Vladimir Putin arrived about a half hour late. Then he took his motorcade to the presidential palace behind me, and then President Trump followed about 10 minutes after that. The two men have been meeting ever since. They had a one-on-one meeting that was scheduled for 1 hour. It went 2 hours. What does that mean? We're about to find out. After that, the aides come in, and they had a working lunch that lasted, based on the clock, about an hour and 10 minutes, maybe an hour and 15. What was said in that meeting on behalf of Mike Pompeo and John Bolton? John Bolton has been a strong critic against Vladimir Putin for years. He was in that meeting today. John Kelly was in that meeting as well, so we'll get a readout on what happened inside there. Also, back with my guests here, Dan and Ed.
Been in a lot of news conferences. I haven't seen a moment quite like that.
The reporters who have gathered here number almost 1,400 strong. And on the list, you have close to 400 who are from Finland. And the Finnish people are making a big push for journalism and their own reporting, sometimes reporting in English oftentimes. There's a big push here in Finland to make that happen and make it more widespread. The rest of the reporters come from the U.S., and they come from Moscow, and they come from all over the world. So whoever that gentleman is, it's not clear where he comes from, but he obviously had a statement to make.
It was a suggestion from John Roberts that he wrote for The Nation, which is obviously a liberal magazine, and had a statement about nuclear disarmament. People are allowed to, there's a First Amendment in America and a free press, and you should be able to express your thoughts, of course, but at a news conference, I think to John's point, it's supposed to have some order where, you know, you're there to hear statements from the leaders, not political statements from the reporters.
Looks like the First Lady is coming in there. Looks like Mike Pompeo as well, dressed in yellow, and I believe right now perhaps
that's usually the last step
Trump
before the leaders
others that will follow, right? So we're about to get underway. There's Ambassador John Huntsman, there's Secretary Kelly, and John Bolton that I mentioned a moment ago. Stephen Miller, Bill Shine, now working as Communications Director of the White House, former executive here at the Fox News Channel. Sarah Sanders, the White House Press Secretary, and others as they file into the room. Sergei Lavrov, he has been on the international stage on behalf of the Russians for what seems decades now. You'll see him at the UN and Washington, D.C., and other parts around the world. He is one of the leading spokespeople and negotiators on behalf of the Russian government and Vladimir Putin. So here we are, Sandra, as we're about to get underway with the two leaders about to enter the room.
And the president saying our two countries, frankly, we have not been getting along well. I really think the world wants us to get along, Bill. And Putin, for his part, says that the two remain in regular contact. They talk by phone. They've met, obviously, at several international events. And speaking through his translator, the Russian president said the time has come to have a thorough discussion on various international problems and sensitive issues. The two world leaders making indications that they were going to have some big talks today, and surely they did. And here they are. Let's listen to the President of the United States and the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin.
Спасибо большое. Thank you so much. Мы можем начать работать, так я понимаю. Shall we start working, I guess? Уважаемый господин президент, distinguished Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, negotiations with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, took place in a frank and business-like atmosphere. I think we can call it a success and a very fruitful round of negotiations. We carefully analyzed the current status, the present and the future of the Russia-United States relationship, key issues of the global agenda. It's quite clear to everyone that the bilateral relationship are going through a complicated stage, and yet those impediments, the current tension, the tense atmosphere, essentially have no solid reason behind it. The Cold War is a thing of past. The era of acute ideological confrontation of the two countries is a thing of the remote past, is a vestige of the past. The situation in the world changed dramatically. Today, both Russia and the United States face a whole new set of challenges. Those include a dangerous maladjustment of mechanisms for maintaining international security and stability, regional crises, the creeping threats of terrorism and transnational crime, the snowballing problems in the economy. We are